This failure and now this retest of lows is not an encouraging sign and does suggest that we could potentially see the markets trade a bit lower here over the next week, 2, 3. This is what you need to know before the bell this morning. So on Friday, the markets had a fairly sharp decline. Now this decline on Friday was outside of normal kind of parameters of daily pullbacks. However, we had 4 such pullbacks like this in last year. So again, these declines of 1.5%-ish, 1.8%, they're not abnormal, right? They do happen. We had 4 of these last year, and those mostly occurred right before big events. We saw this during the yen carry trade blow up, and then the markets recovered shortly thereafter. We saw that kind of sell-off going into the election. Then the markets recovered after that. So again, big declines like this are an unwinding of positions that typically get at least a short-term bounce following them. So one of the things we will be looking for here is not kind of jumping to conclusions and making big changes ahead of where you should be making them. So what are we looking for here? Particularly with this morning, futures are pointing down this morning. So we're going to be looking to retest these lows that we set back here in this initial decline. And one of the things that we kind of look for here is look for the markets to hold this initial level of support. Now, if they do that, you should expect a little bit of a bounce here. And look, you're not going to probably get a lot of a bounce, but selling here typically tends to be the mistake for a lot of people, particularly when you've had 3 straight days of declines and fairly large ones at that. And if the market ends lower today, that'll be 4 straight days of decline. Normally, you only get 3-4 days in a row before you get a little bit of a bounce in the markets. And sometimes these bounces can be pretty big. We saw one last Monday that was near 2%. So these bounces can be fairly significant. Now, here's the good news and the bad news. The good news is that markets are oversold here to a degree. So again, we're still running on pretty oversold levels. There's been lots of selling over the course of this decline. And again, we're still within that 10% kind of median annual decline that we often get. So again, the market dynamics so far have not been outsized. The sell-off's been orderly. There hasn't been a lot of panicking going on. But this is the bad news. Bad news is that we failed right at the 200-day moving average. And again, we did this bounce. We had a nice bounce here. Markets ran to the 200-day moving average, failed. That is not a good sign for the markets. And now, if the markets had immediately recovered back above the 200-day moving average, that would have been bullish. This failure and now this retest of lows is not an encouraging sign and does suggest that we could potentially see the markets trade a bit lower here over the next week, 2, 3. So want to be a little bit cautious here about kind of positioning. And if you want to look to add a short position or hedge or reduce equity risk, look for a bit of a bounce here that basically kind of sets the market up for a decline. Now, if we go crashing through this lower level, we could see some more declines immediately. So there may not be a lot of opportunity here to rebalance portfolios at this point. A couple of things to be careful of, though, as I said, markets are oversold here. And sentiment is pretty negative, really, kind of across the board. Hedge funds have been selling pretty dramatically here over the last several weeks. We've had some of the biggest selling on record by hedge funds. Typically, when we see that, we typically get a reflexive rally of some sort after. But whatever rally we get, this is going to be an opportunity to rebalance your portfolio at this point, start looking to remove some risk, raise a little bit of cash here. Again, the markets could immediately reverse and start to move up higher if Trump comes out on Tuesday and says, I've changed my mind on tariffs. This market's going to take off screaming. Right now, it's all about the uncertainty and the economic policy uncertainty in general driving the sell-off. So any changes to that is going to lead to a sharp reversal. But all you have to do is just simply re-put positions back on portfolios. This is, just kind of have to navigate this market right now. But this morning, futures are going to be pointing lower. Market's likely going to open down. We'll kind of see how the market goes there from there, and we'll talk about that tomorrow, kind of what actions to take next. That's what you need to know before the bell this morning.